Turkey's foreign policy challenges in 2018 remained complex and varied. It remained heavily engaged in Syria, where it's trying to forge peace, but is also threatening further military operations against Kurdish terrorists. Its relationships with the United States and Europe remain tense, particularly over its intention to buy Russian-made surface-to-air missiles. And then in October, the Saudi dissident and writer Jamal Khashoggi was brutally killed in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul, sparking a huge diplomatic row with Riyadh. I'm Simon McGregor-Wood, and I'll be speaking to the senior Turkish presidential advisor Gulnur Aybet, one-on-one. So, Gulnur Aybet, thank you very much for joining TRT World for this version of one-on-one. Looking back and perhaps also forward at Turkey's foreign policy challenges, it's been a busy 2018. I'd like to start first with Syria and Donald Trump's recent decision to pull his military out of Syria, declaring the fight against Daesh, ISIS, more or less concluded. What is Turkey's reaction to that? And I wonder to what extent you saw that decision coming, because it shocked many people.
Well, for Turkey, the main priority with regards to Syria is one that relates directly to our national security. And that is the presence of the PKK affiliate YPG across the border, from which they have been launching operations against us within Turkey. So this is the main reason that we undertook the operation in Afrin, the Operation Olive Branch, where we cleared the YPG PKK from the area. If we hadn't done that, they were going to continue using their bases in Hatay to launch operations in Turkey. Now, with regards to the decision by the Trump administration to withdraw their forces, I don't think this really comes as a surprise, because President Trump has said from the very beginning, since he took office, that the one thing he wants to do, if anything, is to remove US troops from Syria. And as long as the fight with Daesh is over, he says, as soon as it's over, I will withdraw these troops.
Do you believe it's over? Because you say it's not surprising. It appears to have surprised many of his own close advisors. And there are many experts in the field who suggest that the fight is looking good, but by no means over. There are several thousand Daesh fighters still in that part of Syria. Do you fear that Turkey is going to have to take up the mantle and finish the job that the Americans are leaving behind?
Well, let's not forget that Turkey cleared a very large area from Daesh single-handedly, and cleared a large area from Daesh more than any other member of the international coalition against Daesh. So we did this with Operation Euphrates Shield. And the reason why we did that was because we were suffering from Daesh attacks in Turkey more than any other member of the coalition. What concerns us, of course, two things with regards to Syria. We don't want a terrorist presence, whether it's Daesh or PKK, on our border. That is a priority.
But with the Americans gone, you have to deal with both, don't you now?
But we also want to make sure there's a stable, secure Syria, territorially intact, with its sovereignty intact as well. So territorial integrity and sovereignty intact. So we're very clear about these things. Now, whatever the reason for the Trump administration to make this call, I personally think that it's something that was due to happen, because he had this in mind.
Did you know of it in advance?
No. And the other thing is, like, there's these 2,000 troops. There was, I believe, some kind of understanding that between the White House and the Pentagon, that the 2,000 troops would stay at least for some time. It seems like now a new assessment has been made, and that they are not. Now, this is something that the American administration has decided. So whatever their assessment is on how far the fight against Daesh has gone, I mean, that's not something that I should comment on. But on the other hand, Daesh, the fight against Daesh, it's just not confined to Syria, or the fight against terrorism, or radical elements. It's not just confined to Syria. And in fact, I believe that the spokesperson from the Pentagon, shortly after the decision was announced by the White House, said that we are moving on to the next phase of our fight against Daesh, and we're ready to work with our allies anywhere. And I think the anywhere emphasis is very important, because from that we can see that the Pentagon is looking at this at a much wider geographical scope than Syria. So it's really at this stage, I don't think it would be right to sort of speculate on what the American medium-term plans are, but it looks like that the Pentagon definitely see this as something beyond Syria.
There have been some issues, haven't there, of coordination. It was flagged that the Turkish government is preparing a new military engagement in Syria. You've had conversations. There were worries about the involvement of Americans on the ground, how to avoid them. Presumably, this is a wonderful simplification from the Turkish perspective, that you now more or less have a carte blanche to go in without the concerns you had about targeting American soldiers.
We have been very firm and very determined when we said that we are not going to allow a terror corridor on our 900-kilometer border with Syria. Now, and then from the statements that you saw coming from our president, but also from the foreign ministry and also from our defense minister and our foreign minister as well, we specified certain areas. We did mention Afrin first, before the Afrin operation. We specified Manbij, and we have also specified east of the Euphrates. So when we say the 900-kilometer border, we're very clear about where these contiguous zone of a terrorist presence should not be allowed to stay. So from the very beginning, we've been very clear with the Americans, very honest about what we feel about Manbij and the east of the Euphrates. Now, when the Americans made this very unfortunate decision to arm the YPG, initially they told us it was just for the Raqqa operation. We were prepared to do the Raqqa operation with them, but they chose to do it with the YPG by arming them. And then they promised us, after this operation, they would remove the YPG east of the Euphrates from Manbij. They would take back all the arms they've given them, and they would stop arming them. Well, none of those promises were fulfilled. Now, very slowly, as time moves on, of course, we're now cooperating in Manbij. Joint patrols have started, and we believe that the cooperation there will yield results.
Does the Turkish government have worries and anxieties about getting drawn into a quagmire? We've seen it with the United States in Afghanistan and other places. These are operations that are relatively easy to start, but when do you pull out? And what is the longer-term ambition for that part of Syria from the Turkish perspective? When do you define victory and bring the soldiers home?
I think the objectives are very clear. We don't want a terror corridor on our border.
Do you have to stay there to make sure it never comes back?
We have already had two very successful operations in northern Syria, and we have not been drawn into a quagmire.
But you're still there?
But we're still there. Now, there are different layers to all of this. We are not just concerned with the military operations. Of course, that is a strategic priority for us right now, a national security priority for us right now, because we are the ones who are suffering the terrorist attacks most from any other member of the coalition. So that's one thing. But then on the other hand, we're also on the forefront of the international diplomacy in trying to find a political solution for Syria. So you can see that our approach is multidimensional towards Syria in getting a settlement. We are very much involved in the Geneva process for a political solution. We are the only NATO member in the Astana process, which is important because it's the only process that can deliver results on the ground, as we saw with Idlib. Otherwise, I think Geneva would be an empty shell without Astana. And that was also confirmed by the Quartet Summit that we held in Istanbul with the leaders of France, Germany, and Russia that we brought together there. So literally brought the small group and the Astana group together. We were the only country to achieve this. So we've been on the forefront of diplomacy to find a political solution. We want a secure and stable, territorially intact Syria on our doorstep. But we also want to eradicate the terrorist threat to our own territory.
Understood. Can I
so
ask you for
until the
clarification
just
on the
finish.
peace process?
Yes,
Can I
but
ask
just
you-
let me
it's like
finish
repeating
this thing.
yourself on that issue, I
But
think.
the thing is, you asked like how you're still there. We have to be there for the time being because the political settlement has not been reached yet, and we have not secured a peaceful, stable Syria as yet. And the terrorist elements are still there.
On the future of Syria, on the hope for a peace process and a new constitution, very, very complicated, work ongoing. Can you clarify for us what the Turkish government's position is on the possibility of doing future business with Assad still in power in Damascus?
Turkey has always said from the beginning it is not realistic to assume a post-conflict Syria with Assad, who is responsible for killing so many of his own people. Not realistic, and also from a moral perspective, not right.
What happens if whatever democratic structures are put in place return him to power in some form?
Well, I mean, there is going to be some kind. Let's go one step at a time. We haven't even done with the Constitutional Committee yet. So first of all, in the Geneva process, we have to create a Constitutional Committee. And then they will work on a new Syrian constitution. And then we need to work towards, what is the right way to move forward. But at the end of the day, this is a decision for the Syrian people. And, in the Geneva process, and also the way the Astana process has been supporting that with the opposition movements involved in this, all of them are there. So this is a chance for everybody to get together and try to create a future Syria together. But in that picture, we are very firm on this. We cannot allow any terrorist group.
Can I move on now to the broader relationship with your partners? First of all, the United States. Wherever I look, there seem to be bones of contention, and the relationship seems not as good as it once was and perhaps should be. Why has it soured, and what is going on behind the scenes that I'm not aware of to fix it?
Well, I think, with the United States, our biggest issue has been their arming of the YPG and their continuing support for it. Are they
listening to you on that?
We're working in Manbij together.
And they're leaving?
Well, we do cooperate with them. After all, we're allies in NATO. We have these 3 working mechanisms that were established on Syria, one of them, and they've been meeting quite regularly.
But do they accept your point of view, where previously they might have not? Have you moved it on towards your point of view, do you think?
Well, I think they understand very well what our national security priorities and concerns are, and they've been trying to allay these in their own terms, but then it's up to us to accept what's acceptable to us and what isn't when they try to assure us. If they didn't understand, they wouldn't have tried to assure us, would they? So, I mean, yes, I think there's an understanding there. So I think that's one issue. The other issue, of course, is the FETÖ, the Gülen movement. And we
extradition.
The extradition.
Is that a real prospect, do you think? There's been some confusing messages about that.
Our Justice Minister has recently made a statement that we are seeing some positive developments there. So I think, this is a long drawn-out process, of course. We have handed over a lot of evidence. We've had the more technical issues discussed with our various officials. And there's been a lot of back and forth.
Do you think that issue is a block on a really good relationship? I mean, for as long as that man remains in the United States.
It's a serious issue.
Yeah.
It's a serious issue because we had a very bloody coup attempt in our country, and we know exactly who's behind it. And for a NATO ally of ours not to take this seriously would be totally unacceptable.
Can I ask you, you've mentioned NATO a couple of times, and that's an organisation of which you've been a linchpin member from the very beginning, and your NATO partners have real concerns about a decision that Turkey is taking on the purchase of Russian-made S-400 missiles, one of the most sophisticated systems of its kind in the world. You're under big pressure on that decision. Are you going to give that purchase up?
Look, from 1991 onwards, since the first Gulf War, Turkey has been acutely aware of a capability shortfall in its defense. That is an air and missile system, defense system. And since then, more than 20 years, we have been actively pursuing a way to meet that requirement. Now, first and foremost, we always wanted to, of course, work with our allies, but we also have certain requirements with regards to producing our own national air and defense missile system. And as you know, our defense industry, nationally produced defense industry, was nowhere near to what it is now. Now, 60% of our defense industry is nationally produced. We've come a long way, and we want to develop that, so it's all integral to that plan, the air and missile defense requirement that we still have. So, when we talk just about the needs and requirements, the S-400 fulfills our requirements for this particular time. We are ready, so we always said that we are ready to negotiate and look at every deal that was possible, which we did. This was the most suitable deal for us, and we're going to take it.
If
Now,
a
we're
NATO
going to
partner
take it.
came forward with an equivalent deal, as we know is being discussed behind the scenes about the possibility of the Americans providing you with an equivalent Patriot missile system, for example, it is being discussed, we read about it. Would you, to make things good with your allies, cancel the Russian deal and go for the NATO-based one?
We would only consider anything that would be good for our own defense requirements. Now, the S-400 fulfills our defense requirements for the time being, but further down the road, as I said, we're determined to develop our own national air and missile defense system. And as we're developing that, we are perfectly open to look at different offers, but we do have a requirement for the joint production and technology transfers. So, you know,
Sensitive areas.
Sensitive areas,
Sure.
but we're willing to, you know, we can look at these things. But for the time being, the S-400 stands. And you mentioned NATO. This is not a NATO issue. The NATO Secretary General, Jens Stoltenberg, had said that Turkey has every right to go ahead with whatever purchase it deems necessary for its own defense requirements. So in no way is it contradictory to Turkey's NATO commitments. Now, some NATO allies, I see some, might have an issue with it, they might feel uncomfortable with it, but it's not a NATO issue.
But it's not a closed issue yet, is it?
Well, I mean, we are going ahead with the S-400 purchase, I can tell you that much. But we are also looking to develop our own national missile and air defense system.
The issue which is in a way connected of the F-35, the new American superjet. You want to be part of that process, you want to be part of that program.
We are part of that
process. You want to be part of that production process. That's a big deal for Turkey.
Yeah.
But people in Congress are not happy with you getting this plane for as long as you have the S-400. Can you understand that concern?
Well, they may have that concern, but we are part of the F-35 project.
You sure
I don't think that it's possible for the United States to exclude us from that, given the commitments that have been made.
But you can understand that having this F-35 program alongside an S-400 purchase looks weird.
No, it doesn't.
Why doesn't it?
It doesn't at all. We are doing...
You know there are concerns
No,
about
there
the
are
transfer of
concerns,
capability
but it
awareness.
does not look weird at all. We will go ahead and do whatever is necessary for our own national security requirements.
There are defence experts who are very worried about you having an F-35 and the S-400 and the transfer of capability.
There is no technological impediment there.
Let's move on to the story that's grabbed the headlines in recent months, more than any other perhaps. The killing of the Saudi dissident Jamal Khashoggi in Turkey, in Istanbul. Can you tell us how the Turkish investigation is going and when we might be hearing more about the progress?
Well, the investigation is still going on, so we can't talk about it while the investigation is going on.
But we regularly hear updates, don't we?
Yes. Well, and you will hear updates as things get, if new evidence is found. And it might be, because as an investigation is going on, you don't know what next is going to be unearthed. But I can say this much, so far we have shared all the evidence that we have found with various countries and with Saudi authorities. And we're very determined that there should be no cover-up and that this should be investigated fully so that all those responsible are disclosed. So we are very determined to this, because this is a terrible crime that was committed in Turkey. So we're very, but we also want to get more cooperation from the Saudis. They haven't really cooperated with us so far.
Would it help to
It would be
broaden
better for them to do so.
The inquiry and take up this offer of a sort of UN-backed international investigation? That is an option, isn't it? To which Turkey seems slightly resistant. Do you think it's a good idea?
No, it is an option, and our foreign minister has already said that this could be considered. But the investigation is still going on in Turkey. So, let us see how that goes on. Let us see if the Saudi government is going to cooperate, because the president said that it would be in the interests of Saudi Arabia to cooperate and also unearth exactly what's behind this and reveal who is responsible. Because if the Saudi authorities don't do this, then this is just going to drag on and the suspicions are going to go on. It's much easier, it's going to be much better for them to clear this than to let it go on like this.
The cynics say that Turkey's playing this case, this investigation, very skillfully in a diplomatic way.
I think we've handled it very well.
That it is using the case to undermine Saudi Arabia's preeminent status.
No.
Is there any truth to that
No,
accusation?
you know what the president said at the G20? He said that we, in no way do we want to damage or undermine the Saudi government or the Saudi royal family. And we believe it's in their best interest to cooperate.
But what if a leading member of the Saudi royal family was proven by your investigation or any other investigation to be the person responsible?
Well, that's up to the Saudis. We just think there's an investigation going on, and we have told them that it's in their best interest to cooperate.
Would Turkey like to replace Saudi Arabia as the preeminent Sunni state in the Middle East? Do you have a larger ambition in that regard?
Turkey is a major player in the Middle East. It has the rotating chair of the OIC, which during that time, it has convened the OIC member states twice in summits in Istanbul over the Jerusalem issue. It has actually forged a solidarity in the OIC never seen before. So it's playing an important step there in terms of diplomacy in the Islamic world, but it's also playing an important role also in providing security and stability in Syria, both militarily and diplomatically. And it's a member of NATO. It doesn't have to replace anybody. Turkey, in its own right, is unique. It's a NATO member, it's a European country, it's a major player in the region, and it has its own unique relationship with Russia.
It's been a very complicated year, 2018, as it draws to a close. What do you think are the dominant challenges that face Turkey in 2019? Where would you like to be on these issues that we've touched on, looking back in
I,
a year?
I think that, you know, not just for Turkey, but for the region and the world, we really need to see some solution to Syria. Because the further it drags on, the problems that emanate from Syria create wider problems, not just in the region, but also globally. There's the threat of terrorism, there's instability, and there's large-scale human suffering. Now, we already host 3.5 million refugees. We're the world's leading country in providing humanitarian aid according to percentage of GDP. But we want this humanitarian suffering in Syria to end.
Are you optimistic that progress on Syria will be made in 2019?
If all parties involved to this want to see an end to this war, and I believe they do, they're going to find avenues to cooperate, I believe.
Gulnur Aybet, thank you very much for joining us for this one-on-one. It's
Thank
been a
you.
pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.